I'm not going to waste time with the usual preamble of this video. I think most of us already know what we're talking about today, especially if you've seen the title, which I assume you have if you clicked the video, but we're talking about inspiration. It's an optional rule in the DMG and Player's Handbook. It's a rule that everybody knows about because it was pushed pretty importantly in the beginning days of 5th edition, and so I know that a lot of people know about this rule. But despite this, a lot of people have asked my opinions on it, and I really didn't want to necessarily give my opinions, much like most things, because so many other people have talked about it. But I've begun to realize that for some reason, despite the fact that so many people have talked about these topics before, you guys keep asking me to talk about it, as if I'm gonna have some life-changing opinion on it. I promise that I'm not, but I am more than willing to discuss it with you guys and give you some things to think about with it. So, let's talk about inspiration. Play Your Role is a proud affiliate of Only Crits Dice. Check the link in the description for beautiful hard-edged dice sets as well as a coupon code in order to be able to get 15% off your next order. If you want amazing high-quality tabletop products as well as to support the channel, please go ahead and check it out. Enjoy the video. So here's the deal, inspiration, and we're not talking about bardic inspiration here. Inspiration itself is a civic rule in the DMG, which basically means if somebody does something which impresses the DM may reward them with an inspiration point. An inspiration point is essentially a reroll. Once you've rolled, you can choose to reroll using your inspiration point. You expend it, you're done, you get to reroll. It's something to encourage roleplay and important storytelling. And I'm probably going to throw out something a little bit interesting here. It is a rule first and foremost for storytelling. It is typically for the DM to use when they believe somebody is really invested in the game and doing something interesting in the game, not necessarily mechanically. It's not, I rolled a natural 20 and dealt 76 points of damage, woo! No, it's more like, in this moment, know the optimal thing to do, but I'm going to choose to do the thing that influences the story more. And I think that's what inspiration is mainly for. So with all that being talked about and the interesting things about inspiration, I don't use it. And I know that may seem a little weird because I, first and foremost, push roleplay. I believe in roleplay and storytelling and the amazing things that you could do with it at D&D, and yet I have never used inspiration. Well, that's not true. I'd used inspiration before, very briefly in the first campaign I ever ran, but it began to just sort of fade out, and I stopped using it. And I'm going to explain why, and then explain why it is that I think inspiration is a good and important rule, why I don't use it, and why I think I see so many comments on my videos toting a very specific thing that seems to plague a lot of D&D groups, and how inspiration is more than likely the fix for that. So here we go. First things first. Here's why I don't use inspiration. I don't find it entirely necessary. Now, it's a really cool rule, don't get me wrong. It lets people do some really cool things and it lets them be willing to take risks. And if you have an incredibly cautious party, giving them inspiration is honestly a very good thing to do. And over the course of me researching this video so that I could talk about it, I actually have really reconsidered my stances on using inspiration in my games. The main reason I don't use it is because it's meant to encourage one specific thing, making a suboptimal decision for character roleplay. And what do I mean by that? Well, inspiration is meant to encourage somebody to do something that's going to be more interesting for the sake of the story, knowing it may be negative for their character. For example, in Critical Role, there's a very important battle in which one particular guest NPC decides that they're going to use disadvantage on their attack rolls because they are fighting somebody who they are terrified of. First of all, those of you who have seen Critical Role probably know who I'm talking about. Those of you who haven't, I'm not going to tell you because it's a very important spoiler. Regardless, that's a moment where if a group is using inspiration, which Critical Role does not, mind you, that would have been a time to give the character inspiration because they were intentionally doing something that made the story more interesting but harmed their character. And the reason that you do this is it gives the player a confirmation and a sort of resolution to what's going on. It gives them the peace of knowing that yes, I am choosing to do this and it is harming me, but when it comes to the time where I want my character to do a cool thing, I want my character to redeem themselves, I want the pendulum of fate to swing over to my character side and I get to do an incredibly cool thing because I decided to do something not cool in this moment, you then have your inspiration point. When something is character defining, important, I want to make this roll for persuasion to save the party. I want to shine here, but I've rolled a natural one. Fear not. I have a point of inspiration. Essentially, it's meant to be a pendulum. You choose to make a suboptimal decision, and then it swings to the other side for when you want to make the best decision and you want it to move forward. It's insurance to create an interesting story. Now, not all groups use it like like this, and I know that this is not the quintessential way of using inspiration. It's not always if you make an important or suboptimal decision, now you get an inspiration point. A lot of people do it just, oh, you did something cool, use an inspiration point, or have an inspiration point. Most groups do that, but I personally have always seen it as when somebody makes a story-based decision, they get an inspiration point, so later down the line when they want to make a mechanical decision or something that they really feel is important for their character, they have the option of using an inspiration point, which then increases their chance of having that cool character moment. See? So that's how I particularly use inspiration when I do, but I don't use it that often. And so this is where we're going to get a little bit interesting, because I'm going to address something I see a lot in the comments. On most of my shorts and my TikTok and Instagram, which, by the way, if you guys don't follow those, please go follow me there. I actually just hit 10,000 followers on TikTok, and I'm close to hitting 200 on Instagram. I started Instagram a little bit later, so if you guys could go over there and follow me, I'd really be appreciative. I make a lot of really cool homebrew that I personally design, so if you guys want to give me feedback on that, that would be awesome. Links in the description. But regardless, a lot of the comments on my shorts, TikToks, and Reels all say the same thing. I will present an interesting roleplay scenario. I will say, what if your characters had this presented to them? What if they had an NPC where they had to have an important conversation? Or, more particularly, I recently released this. Picture this. Your party has completed one of the dungeons, and at the end, instead of treasure, they find a single glowing blue ember. They can consider what it is, and they try and do some research about it, and eventually they find out that this ember is known as the Torch of Knowledge. If somebody sticks their hand into it, they can gain the knowledge of an answer to a single question. Any question at all. But once they do so, the flame disappears. This leads to an interesting conundrum as the party has to figure out what is an important question for all of them to know. They have to figure out what's important for the entire group and not be selfish about it. And it can lead to a very interesting arc where everybody decides what it is that they care about most within the party. Now, I thought that was an interesting encounter. I thought it would be really fun to present that in front of the players, but almost all of the comments on a lot of those videos say the same thing. Oh, well, it only gets ruined when the rogue sneaks forward while nobody's looking and sticks their hand in and asks something stupid. Or, oh, well, a player's just going to run forward and selfishly take the answer for themselves. Or, oh, I'd just stick my hand in there and immediately ask how to make another one of these flames. Every single one of those comments, not all of the comments, but those comments addressing it in that fashion, all had a very negative viewpoint of their characters. They all had a very negative viewpoint of their table, of their party. They assumed they were going to intentionally ruin things. And I thought that was very interesting. Because here's the kicker, I've run that exact encounter in my game. In fact, most of those TikTok shorts, Reels, all those things where I present those encounters, I'm not coming up with them out of the blue. I've created them and run them in my game before. And yet everybody says it would never work because the players are too chaotic. No, do I simply just have the best players ever? Well, they're not the best ever, but I really appreciate them. They do prioritize the story, but here's the deal. That's the difference. And that's why I don't use inspiration. My party, my table, prioritizes the story. They're willing to make the suboptimal decision, not because they get an inspiration point, but because they think it leads to a more fascinating narrative. And if you have a party that is that chaotic, that crazy, that problematic, right, to constantly want to ruin your encounters, constantly not want to follow through the story, or constantly just want to kill NPCs without hearing them out, it's probably because they don't focus too much on the story. And that's where inspiration comes in. That's where you can encourage them. Because here's the deal. This is not going to be the case for all of those types of players, but I do believe it is one particular type of player that is pretty common. When they make those decisions, it's not because they're trying to ruin the story. It's because they desperately want their character to succeed. They desperately want to fulfill their character fantasy. If I am playing an assassin rogue, I don't want to have the chance to give this boss all this pompous exposition and the chance to be able to trap me. I want to feel cool and awesome and assassinate him before he does anything. That is the type of player who typically goes in and ruins those encounters. Now, is it always? No, of course not. There are so many different types of players, and not a single one of them is like another exactly. But there are a lot of players that act like that. And so they act that way, ruin encounters, push things forward, don't let the story unfold, because they're desperate to fulfill their character fantasy. And that's why a lot of them act that way. But inspiration, in some ways, fixes this. Don't give them inspiration for doing something cool, because that only encourages them to keep trying to have the next coolest moment. And cool moments are great. There's gotta be contrast. A cool moment amongst a sea of cool moments is nothing more than average. right? I mean, we can watch all these Fast and Furious movies where they do all these insane stunts, but who cares anymore? They do all those insane stunts in every single movie. You come to expect it. Yes, it's still fun and the spectacle is cool and the stunt work is amazing, but it doesn't have the same hit as watching a really cool moment in a less saturated movie, right? So that's why it's important to not reward the inspiration on those cool moments, but instead when they choose to do something that follows the story. And it doesn't have to be a suboptimal decision. If they make a really dramatic sacrifice play and manage to kill somebody before they kill the rest of the party, that was technically the optimal play. They did something amazing, but it was also really cool for the story. So reward them when they choose a story-based moment, and they will feel more confident in those moments where they get to be their character. They get to fulfill their character fantasy because they have an inspiration in their back pocket. And that ultimately is where I think inspiration points can really be the most helpful. And even with me saying all this, I still think I might reintroduce it to my campaigns. Do it. Because I think it is a lot more interesting to reward characters and reward players and say, hey, I was watching you, I saw your character do that. I think it's interesting. But try it out and see if that can help out your party. So go out into the world and make it your own, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a great day, and of course, never forget to play your role. A huge shout out to all those divine bastards over on our Patreon that helped make this video happen. Big D the Cool Guy, BKBW, Diet Blue, Duplicolor, Sassy Productions, Sorit, Supreme Court, Talia Martin, Tenai, Void Mystic, and Volpe Nico. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without our patrons, and we are very thankful for your continued support. You guys are the absolute best, and I will never take your support for granted.